I'm upset. No disrespect, respectfully. But disrespectfully is disrespect. Don't be disrespectful. Those vile, disgusting Spartans. Poor little bro, man. And I'm gonna tell him why I'm mad. That vile, disgusting cesspool in Columbus. The other state, and of course, as always, I'm upset. Have you ever asked yourself, why am I paying so much for cell phone service? I'm sure you have. I know I have. And I have a solution for you in the form of Mint Mobile. Use the description in the video here. Check out Mint Mobile's plans. You can get unlimited service for as low as $15 a month. That is not a gimmick. Trust me. Stay in. Good evening, everyone, or morning. I'm sorry. I usually do this in the evening, but it is good morning today. I am the Maze Madman. That is over there, Allen Trieu. Allen, let me give you a proper introduction. Allen Trieu, 24/7 Midwest recruiting analyst, a contributor to CBS Sports, Fox Sports, I believe the Big Ten Network. That Allen Trieu is here with us today. Allen, how you doing?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me. And thanks for moving it into the morning.
No problem, man. Anything, like I said, where I live, the county could be on fire. Nothing was more important than this. Allen, obviously there are tons of questions for you. A lot of people had questions, especially regarding Michigan and their recruiting efforts, or at least what we deem to be their recruiting efforts. But first, let's talk a little bit about you. You're from the state of Michigan, correct?
Yeah. Live in Grand Rapids now, grew up in the Holland, Zeeland area, went
Very
to
nice.
Grand Valley, and have been around West Michigan.
Very nice. So in doing my research on you, Allen, and I know that Wikipedia pages can be updated by anybody these days, right? And I'm not sure if you are aware of the Grand Valley Allen Trieu Wikipedia page.
Oh, yeah, the one that I made myself.
Okay. Hilarious stuff. And I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that before I moved forward at all with it. But for anybody who doesn't know, check out the Allen Trieu Wikipedia page. It's awesome. But yeah, good stuff. Moving on just a little bit. What exactly got you interested in college football or college football recruiting to begin with?
Oh boy, I was a draft junkie, and
Okay.
I was into it from the earliest ages. I was into the draft at 5-6 years old. I was buying. There wasn't a lot of available. Now there's all kinds of draft coverage. I always tell people they don't know, draft fans now don't know how lucky they are. We used to have to order these guides. It looked like a field guide you would buy for wildlife. It was this little booklet, black and white, very few pictures. And I used to buy those until I think the Sporting News came out in about the late 90s with their draft guide. And then they started having draft coverage on TV. But even before that, they would show the draft on TV, but lead up, there was none of what you saw now. You definitely couldn't watch the combine and pro days and all that. So I was following it back then. I had my own draft site.
Very nice.
And then West Michigan happened to have a couple of recruits, Ron Johnson, Kevin Grady. I got a little bit interested in that, started writing about those guys. Actually played against Grady, I think, when he was a freshman and I was a senior. And then there was, people from Scout, which was what was Scout at the time. It's now 24/7. Noticed, asked me if I wanted to help out. I switched over and I just found high school recruiting to be more fun because you're discovering them earlier and before they kind of blow up. And I like that part of it.
Absolutely. We got 21 people here watching. Make sure we have 21 likes. Share this with your friends on social media. Allen Trieu, superstar recruiting analyst Allen Trieu is here with us. Allen, so expanding on the high school recruiting thing just a little bit, what is it like? when you see a kid, I don't know, 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever it is that you decide, hey, like we're gonna start looking at this kid and give him like some star rating or whatever. Like what goes into that? What are you looking for when you do that, and how do you build those relationships?
Yeah. So first, if we see an 8th grader that we are going to track, it's usually pretty easy. That's
Okay.
obvious.
Yeah.
Like Bryce Underwood in the 8th grade was already like 6'2", 6'3", and could
Right.
throw the ball, 60 yards. It was just those guys are obvious. The harder ones are when you get a late bloomer, or maybe a guy who hasn't played football until later in his high school career, or a kid who's off the beaten path. It's the kind of like Quiddy Pays of the world that are harder. But if we see an 8th grader that's getting some interest and we know is going to play varsity, usually that's pretty easy to pick out. Those are, I call them grandma guys. I could bring my grandma to the game. You can be like, Bryce Underwood, that's the guy.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are late developers and late bloomers that are harder to identify, in my opinion. So you're looking for traits that can translate. And more and more we go to other sports for that. Are there track times? Are there throwing numbers? Is there wrestling? There's usually, I mean, if you look up and down NFL rosters, very rarely do you see a guy on an NFL roster that didn't play some other sports in high school and wasn't good at them. So that gives us a little bit of a chance to assess athleticism. We look into gene pool a lot more too, which will give us an idea of how a guy will grow. One of the best examples I can give. I remember when I first started doing this, I went to see, you remember James Ross.
I do.
He had on his team. It was a really good Orchard Lake St. Mary's team. And Allen Robinson was on that team, but he wasn't a big time recruit coming up. He was 5'7", like 125 pounds as a freshman. And then 4 years later, he's 6'3", 185. Right. So you don't always know how a guy's going to grow. Those are the harder ones to identify. As far as like building relationships, I'd like to think it just kind of comes naturally. I think I'm a pretty good people person. I don't try too hard. I just try to get to know the kid and the parents as best as possible in their circle, and also try to do things in a way that where I'm looking out for them. I'm not just chasing the story. I try to report things the way they would want them reported. I try not to jump on things too early without making sure that everybody's good without that news being out there. Sometimes I lose on a story because of that, but I would rather be second or third and keep the relationship. So I think that's been the biggest thing for us in how we keep these relationships, which is more important than ever now because of what we're dealing with today, which is the transfer portal. So we cover these guys for 4 more years sometimes than we used to.
That's very interesting. And yeah, like you said, the extra wrinkle of the transfer portal, you guys are having to, follow guys longer. Heck, coaches on football teams are having to re-recruit guys that they've already got committed to their football teams and stuff like that. So definitely understand that. We got some questions. Troy, my guy, OG Troy, wants to know, are you still doing comedy?
I am still doing comedy. Just did some shows a couple of weeks ago. I've got some stuff coming up in May. Trying to think of what I have in May. I know I'm doing Midland. I know I'm doing something down in the Battle Creek area. I know I'm doing Ludington. So stuff around here. It gets hard this time of year because recruiting travel starts. I've got an Elite 11 next weekend in Ohio. I've got Under Armour in Ohio. We've got the high school workout days coming up and then summer camp. So it's just however I can fit it in, but I am still doing comedy.
Absolutely. Speaking of your comedy, I feel like I would be doing you a disservice and the people a disservice if I didn't share this with them. 1 second. This is the wiki I was talking about earlier. For you guys who can't read that, but definitely check this out. It's hilarious. He first gained notoriety for single-handedly integrating the Zeeland public school system, becoming not only the first Asian student ever at Zeeland High School, but the first one to get a 1 on the AP calculus exam. In his later teens, he would set a number of world records, such as most number of days wearing unmatching socks and consecutive days without flossing his teeth. Excellent work there.
To be clear, I wrote this when I was like 20. So
nice.
At some point, I should probably take that down, but I'm glad you found it.
Yeah, man, that was good. At first I thought I didn't want it to be like somebody that did something mean spirited, and that's why I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Oh
But
yeah,
come to
that
find
was
out, you
created.
are the architect of
That was created by a younger version of me.
right. Yeah. So let's get into some meat and potatoes here. Chris Ballas recently made a comment about Michigan and NIL payments, or their failure to make some NIL payments to some students. In talking with some parents, how true is this? Number one, by the way, I'm not trying to call out Chris Ballas or his reporting, of course. Let me say that first. But how true is this? How concerning is this? Is this something that is reverberating through uh, high school recruiting?
So I should say this: when it comes to NIL, I have to be honest. I try to stay very out of it. I
Okay.
try to, in my lane of reporting on recruiting. It's obviously going to become, it's going to be in there sometimes, and it's going to get
Right.
talked about. But I can't say that I have intimate knowledge of this.
Okay.
So I can't speak to the validity of those comments or the impact. I know from having talked to some recruits, and I still do keep in contact with some guys around the team and parents around the team. I've not
Right.
heard any of that. That doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
So unfortunately, I can't really give you a lot more on that particular subject.
No, man, that's great. As long as it doesn't look like it is. At least you haven't heard it. Let me say that. I don't want to, because again, I'm not calling out Chris Ballas and his expertise either, and his relationships. I don't want to call those into question. But as long as it's not something that everyone's talking about, and they're like, "Yo, don't go to Michigan because they're going to promise you a cheeseburger, but you're really just going to get uh, a wish burger." So anyway, and the cheeseburger thing, the comment was on purpose, by the way, but I digress. Questions from the fans. We've got some questions. We're going to get into those. These are, like I said, ones that I've just collected throughout the week. Number one, know it's been talked about, but damn, what does Michigan have to do to grab some five-star talent? Because winning the Natty hasn't changed much. But of course, I know I'm sure that's supposed to be just fine. Go blue. And I think that's like the sentiment of a lot of Michigan fans is with the success, especially over the last 3 years. Why hasn't that necessarily translated to the recruiting trail? What can you tell us about that?
Couple of things on that. First, I think it's important to note that there's only 32 5-stars per cycle. So
Right.
you're talking about an extremely small snippet of all of the high school talent that's out there. And so it's just tough to land one of those 32. A lot of them, and you're competing against, I think, a lot of schools who in the past, especially now, I think Michigan has started to, with their winning and obviously
Yeah.
a national championship, you can catch up to the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world. But they've been recruiting that kind of talent for several cycles now. I also think you have to, in a way, want to do that. And I'm not saying that Michigan doesn't want 5-star talent, but they've clearly been able to win the national title and several Big Ten championships without doing that. So you can stick to a formula that works. And it's like during that time, you've had some,
Right.
depending on where you looked, JJ McCarthy was a 5, Donovan Edwards was a 5. I think they've gotten some of those guys. If you're going to get, with 32 guys per cycle, if you can get one every couple of years and then
Yeah.
a lot of good 4-star talent that you develop,
Right.
I think that's a more sustainable approach, actually. So, but to answer the question, I think what they need to do now, I think, is reestablish some continuity. There's been some changes on the coaching staff.
Yeah.
And so that they're going to have to reestablish that. They're going to have to, in a way, prove that we can still do what we just did the last 3 seasons with a new coaching staff at the helm. I think upping their NIL game is huge.
Yeah.
That's been talked about. They needed to do that. I think they know that. It sounds like that's in the works. I do think that they're going to do that if they haven't already. It sounds like Michigan is doing more with NIL in terms of high school recruiting. And that's just the lay of the land of how things work in recruiting right now, is that that's going to be a big part of it. They have everything else.
Yeah.
Academics, big stadium, you're winning, you're putting guys in the pros. I think that's the last piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Well said. We got a couple more. This guy just wants to give you a shout out. Been following recruiting 17 plus years. Allen is the GOAT. Shout out to Mo Cheeks 420.
You think that's the real Mo Cheeks?
I don't think it's the real Mo Cheeks, especially after the 420. Although it could be the real Mo Cheeks, depending on who you listen to on the internets there. But anyway, want to know your thoughts about Elijah Dodson trending towards Pitt, especially as Allen Trieu put in the pick for him. Has Lamar Morgan been in contact with him?
I think the contact there was largely that was a Steve Clinkscale recruit. They had built a good relationship. It doesn't sound like the contact is the same right now, and Pitt's been on him hard.
Yeah,
and
pause.
They have some Michigan ties on their staff. Their DB's coach Archie Collins is a Detroit guy. Played at Cass Tech, coached at Detroit Southeastern when they had Jonathan Hankins and Will Golston and all those guys. Right. So he's got some good relationships in the area. And you've seen Pitt come in here and have some impact. And that's why I think Dodson, with that being a DB's coach, a Detroit guy, and somebody who's really prioritized them, that's where I've shifted to Pitt. Now, I think Michigan is they're still figuring their board out. I think they need to go see some of these guys work out in the spring. You ask Lamar Morgan to come in and set a board, and he says he hasn't seen these guys in person. So I think that's where in the next couple of weeks for him and Lou Esposito and Wink Martindale, like getting on the road and being able to see some of these guys with their own eyes is going to be very important. So you never know when something like that could shift. But at the moment, I think Pitt, because they've really prioritized Elijah, had him on campus, and that little bit of Michigan connection on that staff, that's why I have my pick on them right now.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I don't know if you saw, but I've actually interviewed Elijah Dodson right here on this channel. Seems like a great kid, and since that time, even his stock has risen a bit. I think he was a 3-star when we had him on the show. Looks like he's a 5 or 4-star on at least one recruiting service now. So I do think it'll be a great look if Michigan eventually does reach out to him, and hopefully they do. One more before we get to some of the live comments. What's the immediate impact of the Denard news to recruiting? Does it affect any recruits that we're high on? That's from Bryce Sack of Scarlet and Blue.
So it's a little soon, I think, to know how much impact. I don't think I would guess there's not much immediate impact. I think Denard had done a good job. And he's a personable guy, but I don't think that it will negatively affect Michigan in any area. That'll be just something that if he had some relationships with some recruits, the rest of the staff will have to backfill that and make sure that they're keeping in contact with those kids. But I don't see a reason like right now that it would have a huge impact one way or the other.
Absolutely. Make sure you like the stream, share this with your friends. We have Allen Trieu, got him for at least 20 more minutes. So get your questions in if you have them. Let's move on. What's the hold? Mitten Made, I'm sorry, says, what's the hold on commits? Is it NIL? And I think you kind of went over this a bit, but just to rehash a little.
I don't think it's NIL. I think it's more of the staff changes. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the recruits are driving that. I think the staff also wants a chance to, we just got here. Why would we hurry and rush and take some guys?
Of course.
Let's see what we can get in on. Let's actually see some of these guys work out. Let's not rush things just to get some commits in March and April. And so I think you'll see things start to move in that direction in the next couple weeks. If you've noticed, even a lot of schools have a lot of kids set for official visits. Michigan hasn't even done that yet, which I think is a purposeful, measured approach to what I just said, which is let's go figure out now that we can get on the road, let's go figure out where we stand with some of these guys. Let's see what we think of them. So you have a whole different, it's not an entirely different staff, but at least on defense it is. Right. And so it's reconfiguring that entire board and making sure that the guys who were prioritized previously are the guys the staff wants to prioritize. So in saying that, to go back to Elijah Dodson, I'm not saying Michigan doesn't want Elijah Dodson.
Right.
I'm saying that these guys need to get more familiar with him. And so I think there's going to be a lot of that in the next couple of weeks. And then you'll start to see them move towards more commitments. But I think to this point, that's why they've just wanted to. I think there's too much rushing and impatience in recruiting from both fans and schools, and you
Right.
can make some mistakes that way. And I just think Michigan wants to be extra careful about that in a moment of transition.
Absolutely. Here in a second, we'll get into some key recruits out of the Midwest. By the way, guys, keep in mind that Allen is a Midwest recruiting analyst. I know maybe in one of the lead ups I said national, but let's keep in mind he focuses mainly on the Midwest. So a lot of the targets outside of that region, he's not going to have as much information as he would on other targets. So keep that in mind. Moving on, P. Maximus says a lot of concern about lack of commitment. Any truth about the Marion Franklin Columbus corner? I think he's speaking of Dwayne Galloway Jr., an offensive line tackle from Michigan, maybe Avery Gatch there. So what? And I that was a segment we were going to move into on key recruits. Both of them I had in my key recruits for Michigan. So just jumping the gun a little bit. What do you think? Where does Michigan stand with both of those guys, and what's the likelihood they can land either?
Yeah. So first on Galloway, I think he's one of the guys I was kind of referring to recently as well. I have the crystal ball pick on Michigan, and I think that's because he's got a lot of interest in Michigan. They've previously offered him.
Yeah.
I think he is really high on their staff and just what they've been doing at Michigan. Now, I think they also have to learn him. And so he's one of the guys I was, and I put in that pick thinking that once they vetted him and once the new staff got to know him, that he would end up being a guy that they wanted. I mean, he runs 10-4 in the 100-meter dash. He's an Ohio guy. But I think, again, so I think that I know that he's coming up. I think this weekend they're going to go see him at his school. And so I think that there is some learning that has to be done with all the defensive prospects, including him. And I just thought that once both sides really got to know each other, that would be a good match. But it is still kind of TBD, I think, with all defensive recruits. With Avery, it's a little bit different because he's an offensive recruit. And the assistant coach who was recruiting him at the beginning of his recruitment happens to now be the head coach. So there's not going to be a changing of the board or an opinion there because he's got such an established relationship with Sharon that I think Michigan's in great shape for him. And he is a Michigan State legacy because both his parents went to Michigan State. But I actually think Ohio State is the school that is the bigger challenger. They were a really early offer. I think he got Bowling Green he got Toledo first and then Ohio State second, which is very rare for a Michigan kid. And I know he's always appreciated that about Ohio State. That said, I think when you look at what Michigan has to offer him, really good O-line development. You've now really got two offensive line guys there with Grant Newsome and then Sharon moving to head coach. It is close to home, which I don't think is necessarily a main factor for him, but it certainly doesn't hurt with all the other things put together. That I really like Michigan from. I don't think he's going to decide until mid to end of summer, but at the moment, and I think it's been heading this way for a while. If you've listened to analysts over the last few months, it's always been kind of stated that Michigan's the lead school there. There were a couple other predictions for him. And I think Michigan's just sort of maintained that high standing to now. So they just have to do that through the next couple months. And then I think there's a really good chance Avery ends up in the class.
Absolutely. Great. I got to give a shout out to my guy. Shout out to Killer. He's always here. Just want to make sure he knows that I know that he's here. Anyway, besides your crystal ball for Gatch, do you expect any commitments at the spring game this Saturday? I think that is, right?
Not in the moment. I would be surprised if any commitments came in the spring game. You never know. But I think, again, part of that is a more measured approach. And so I think you can lay the foundation for some future commitments. I don't see one happening, although you never know when a kid gets on campus, just kind of feels it and decides to commit. Always remember, I was actually at the Notre Dame night game when DeMonte Thomas committed. And that was definitely not the plan. And he got there And it was just, I think it was the first night game that was played there, and he got
Right.
wrapped up in it and was like, this is where I want to be. I'm committing. So you never know when that could happen, but I'm not expecting it coming in.
Absolutely. Let's see if anyone else has anything interesting. And all right. Who's your favorite 2025 Midwest recruit that Michigan could land?
I think Nate Marshall, which I'm sure you have on your list for us to talk about, but I really like him as a player, a prospect, and always been, I went and saw him live last year, talked to him after the game, and just kind of like his approach and his demeanor. So Nate Marshall would be one of the first that comes to mind.
Absolutely. My guy Dom, he says we lost some recruits to Miami, a couple over the last few years I could think of. How much does geographic location influence recruits regardless of the school's current success?
I think it influences them some. You have to want to be there. But I think, first of all, more than ever, kids are willing to look at different parts of the country. It's not as much. When I first started following recruiting, it was very geographical. Midwest kids generally went to the Big Ten, and West Coast kids played in what was the Pac-10 at the time, and et cetera, et cetera. Now you have all kinds. The country is open to everybody. And I think Miami's doing a good job of coming to the Midwest and recruiting kids. Miami is doing a really good job with NIL, and it is Miami. So I think that there's a sliding scale there of, am I willing? How nice is the place? How interesting is the place if I'm willing to go that far away from home? And so I think Miami offers a lot of that. I think schools like Oregon, if you go out to Oregon and you ever visit their campus, you can see why a kid would travel across the country to go to that school. I still think, generally speaking, if you look at how classes are built, generally speaking, geographic location does matter. Proximity to home does matter, but it's much less every year than it was in the past.
Right. Yeah, no, I can echo those sentiments. These are things that I've told fans of the show, people who have listened to me, is, Miami is Miami outside of it being, for the better part of the last couple of decades, desert for success. Outside of that, though, once you leave campus, it's still Miami, right? So it is. That's got to be a selling point for some kids, like you said. Even if you are willing to go away from home, what does that school have to offer? And Miami has, as Dom put it, bikinis and beaches, as well as other things. But
now I'll say this: they've always had that, right? The bikinis and beaches have always been there. And so it would be a little bit of a disservice to this current staff if we didn't give them credit for recruiting more nationally, getting the NIL thing rolling, and then selling the school. Because prior to this staff getting there, they weren't coming up here and taking kids and winning battles against top Big Ten schools. They're doing that now. And I think that's because of the current coaching staff and their setup.
For sure. Definitely want to give some credit to, like you said, that current coaching staff. Mario Cristobal was doing a good job in Oregon before he took this job, and he's kind of kept that success going. Make sure you like the live if you haven't already. Share this on social media with your friends and family. We've got recruiting analyst and Michigan legend Allen Trieu with us right now, at least for another few minutes. Ty, I'm not sure I understand this completely. Ask him about the Michigan exposure. He has a great eye for talent. I'm not sure exactly what he's trying to say.
I assume he's talking about the Michigan exposure account.
Oh, okay.
Twitter/X.
Got you.
He's kind of a young kid, I believe, from Dearborn, who has been it's almost like he kind of reminds me of what I was like when I was coming up. And he's doing a really good job. He's able to, because he's focused mostly on the state of Michigan. He's able to kind of get a little bit deeper than I can. And I want to be able to do that, but I can't always get into guys that are, walk-ons or D2, D3 type recruits. And he's able to do that. So it's been great for the state of Michigan to have that. He's definitely rising and made that account into something people pay attention to. Works super hard, loves it. And like you said, kind of reminds me of what I was like around that age. So if you don't follow that account, I think that's what was being referred to as there's a Michigan exposure.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. If you don't follow it, follow it. Go check them out. We always want to support um, young people, and especially young people with entrepreneurial talents, if you will. Um, let's move on to my final segment, where Michigan stands with some key targets. We've already been over a couple of them, Allen. So we're not gonna spend too much time on that. In fact, those two were probably right at the top of my list. This one is more of a national one, and I don't know how much you know about this young man, but Douglas Utu recently visited Michigan. He was a former teammate of Micah Kayapana, who is a Michigan commit in the 2024 class out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. What, if anything, do you know about him and where Michigan may stand in his recruitment?
Yeah. So I'm in a group chat that happens to have our West Coast guys in it. So I know what they've mentioned in that group chat. Micah's working hard on him. He's been out there on social media, making it pretty obvious. That said, I think it's going to be a pretty tough battle for Michigan. I believe he was just at Ohio State. They're in the mix. Michigan State's offered him. They're recruiting him. I think that's why I say that is that I think he's willing to look at the Big Ten and coming to the Midwest. And so I think he's very open to that. And that connection with Micah is going to be a big part of it. I think, again, the offensive line success and having two coaches on the staff that have experience there, that's going to be huge. So no crystal balls in yet, but Michigan's definitely in the mix for him. But I think there's still some things to be determined. I think he's one that as the spring evaluation moves along, you'd love to be able to get him to set an official visit date.
Absolutely. Another player that Michigan has been in contact with, and especially since Tony Alford took over, running back in the Cleveland Heights area, Bo Jackson. What are your thoughts there? Is this like a take for Michigan if they get the opportunity?
So there's the two Ohio backs. All right. I assume you're going to ask about Marquise Davis after this.
Yeah. Just throw them both
in the same. They're kind of in the same boat. I think of the two, Michigan has a better chance with Marquise Davis right now.
Okay.
He's been to campus multiple times. I mean, he keeps making visits and a second official. And I think he's also the one that, as his recruitment, both of them were recruited by Alford at Ohio State. And as Davis's recruitment was going, he was the one that I think spoke more strongly about his relationship with Alford. I think Jackson's got a good relationship with Alford too, but Davis has been out there and just said, like, that's, really strong relationship. I think Bo has also kind of branched out a little bit more, so to speak. I know Marquise is looking at Florida and some other schools further away from home, but Bo's gone down to Georgia, Alabama. So he's swimming in those waters. That's always tough to compete against those schools. He's really liked Ohio State. And so I think Michigan is in, a top group for Bo. I think they're a contender for Bo, but I wouldn't say they're the top or the lead. I could make the argument right now that Michigan might be the team to beat for Marquise. They're definitely one of the teams to beat. And so I think of the two, a much stronger chance at Marquise Davis right now.
Absolutely. We'll just go over, I'll just ask you about a couple more that I had on my list. The first being this guy here, Alex Graham, IMG Academy by way of Cass Tech. What are your thoughts there? How is Michigan faring here?
Yeah, I flipped my crystal ball. I was predicting Michigan for a long time. Michigan had offered him early. He has some alumni connection. I believe his mom went to Michigan. And it's I think another situation where changing staff, changing board, changing relationships, it's trending elsewhere. And Colorado's done a really good job in being a defensive back who wants to play for Colorado. Certainly can understand why there would be some allure to that. And he took a visit out there, really, really liked it. And so he's going to decide in 10 days. And I think that as it stands right now, that I expect that pick to be Colorado on that day.
That is not great, but at least for Michigan fans anyway. But yeah, obviously, kid should go where he feels most comfortable and most wanted. So can't hold that against him. Would be another. I know Michigan fans are growing agitated, especially with the in-state guys, top in-state guys, going elsewhere. Bryce Underwood was the one that really broke a lot of hearts. But I do think that would have been a difficult get for Michigan anyway, considering the way they play offense and things like that. So even without coaching changes, might have been a little tough, but doesn't hurt any less. That said, the last guy I'm going to ask you about is also more of a national recruit. Hasn't been much talk about him lately, but DJ Picket. Is Michigan out of this thing, in your opinion?
Oh, the last I heard, they weren't out of it. I mean, that's another guy that I know is from further away, but has some ties to Michigan. And that's just another one. I mean, I'm going to repeat it again with the defensive staff. They haven't really had much of an opportunity yet to get a ton of face time with these guys. I think the spring evaluation period is going to be huge. It's huge for the entire recruiting board. It's particularly big on the defensive side. And so that's where I think they have to reestablish with guys like that, especially when they were being recruited previously by, Jesse Minner and Steve Clinkscale. Mm-hmm. And now they've had this change and the other schools recruiting them haven't. So that's where these new coaches are going to have a big job in the next few weeks to do that. So I wouldn't say out. Nowadays in recruiting, nobody's ever out, but I don't think Michigan's out. I think they just need to reestablish themselves with him.
Absolutely. My guy Troy, before you get out of here, do you have any comedy sets on the internet, family friendly, or leave the kids at home?
Yeah, I have an album on the internet called A Cry for Help. Easiest place to find that is on YouTube. The whole album is on there, so you can pull that up. I would not put that on with the kids around. So fair warning, I do have some cleaner stuff out there. That's not one of them. So leave the kids at home, or have them put their headphones on for that one.
Right. Very nice. There you have it. Dom, last question from Dom. Are recruits expressing a concern or let's wait and see attitude, or is it a non-factor? And this is in regards to the coaching changes. I think you've spoke a little bit about this, but just for clarity.
I think to make it clear though, it's not I wouldn't call it a concern, and I wouldn't call it a non-factor either.
Okay.
It's a factor in the moment, but recruits aren't concerned. I think wait and see is accurate, and I think the coaching, like I said, the coaching staff is doing some wait and see too. Of like, let's go actually watch these guys work out. We're getting to do that. I mean, starting now, so let's not rush this thing and let's get it right. And I like that approach. Like I said, there's now in recruiting moves really fast. You can make some mistakes. You can offer too early. You can take too early. And I think that's where we're actually talking about this next week as the draft is coming along. And, Western Michigan's about to have 3 defensive linemen that were on their roster get drafted. And how does that happen? Well, that happens because Big Ten schools fill up too early and they're able to wait and evaluate guys as seniors. And so I think with Michigan staff, they're saying like, we're just about to have the chance to go on the road. Let's do that. And then we'll come back and assess where everything's at with our board and where these guys are at. So I think it's not, I know that you sit here every day. I appreciate everybody that's on our site every day, refreshing, hoping for commits and crystal balls. And they're like, where are they all? But that's just where it's at right now. And I actually think, as somebody who wants there to be news so that I can write about it and stay employed, I actually think this slow approach is a good approach. So I think they're doing the right thing at the moment.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Allen Trieu. Allen, tell everyone where they can follow you and your work, whether it be 24/7 or sports related or comedy related. Where can they find you?
Sure. Easiest place is on X, or if you still want to call it Twitter, I'm down with that too. Allen Trieu, ALLENTRIEU. I'm on 24/7 Sports. I post on all the sites, but do post quite a bit on our Michigan Insider Victors Club board. And you don't only get to interact with me, but our whole national staff, Sam Webb, obviously, who's I call him the unofficial mayor of Ann Arbor, Sam Webb. Steve Lorenz, Bryce Marich, those guys do a great job as well. And our basketball staff, I don't follow basketball as closely, but the national basketball team with the portal has been doing a great job. So you get that too.
Absolutely.
So you can get on there, interact. I do. I'm not stingy about like you have to only be a premium member for me to answer questions. I do try to respond as much as I can when people ask questions on X. But those are the two best places to find me. My Instagram is all me and my kids. So that you don't want to be. I tell people who follow me on Instagram for recruiting, like you're in the wrong place. And then if you want comedy, like I said, YouTube's probably the best place to find that. I need to that's a reminder. I have to renew with Amazon Music and Apple Music so that my album's on there. But if you want it for free, just go to YouTube and watch it. I'm not concerned about the royalties.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining me today and educating myself and Michigan fans on the process and how it works and where Michigan stands with a lot of these guys. I appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it. And go make sure something's not on fire.
All right. Yeah, I got to get back to work. All right. Allen Trieu, ladies and gentlemen, 24/7 CBS contributor, Fox Sports contributor, Big Ten contributor, and naturally funny and gifted guy. So check him out everywhere. You know who I am, Maze Madman, signing out. By the way, I will be doing something later today. Expect a video from me. I know they've been kind of far in between. I've had a lot going on. By the way, I will be on vacation at the beginning of May, so there will be another break. I apologize. Stay hang in there for me. Anyway, follow me everywhere at Maze Madman. And until next time, stay angry, my friends.